But finally I got a person who was in the program for many years. He died at age 83, and interesting guy. I once was sitting together with him, and I said, "John, you've been sober a long time, haven't you?" "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Come on, John, how long have you been sober?" So he goes into his pocket, picks out a little calendar, and 9,482 days. I said, "What are you talking about? 20 years, 25 years?" "I don't know." He says, "You can afford to think in terms of years." Well, anyway, he became my sponsor. He died at age 84 after 43 years of sobriety. And the night before he died, he still wrote into his calendar 16,000, whatever that was. Right? And he took it very, very seriously. And he made me do my fourth step 6 times. The first 3 times, he sort of said, "You know, you do it again and try to be a little more honest." By the 3rd time, after the 3rd time, he was pretty well satisfied with it. But then he says, "You know, Dr. Twerski, I asked you for an inventory, and you gave me a chimney sweep." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You've only told me everything wrong that you've done in your life. Haven't you ever done anything right? Isn't there anything good about you?" He says, "Go back and this time do an inventory, and I want to know the good things about you, as well as the mistakes that you've made." You know something? That was harder to do than the other way around. And they'll probably tell you where I screwed up, right? But I have to tell you about the good things in myself. And so when Bruce said that I've written a good bit about self-improvement, this is where it came from. This is where it came from, because the program helped me to get a image of myself, a totally different image of myself than I ever had. And as a result of that, a lot of things got better. I had one hell of a problem with anger, with resentments, right? And they all got better. So I'm grateful to the program, because it's, first of all, it's given me enough material for 61 books. And by the way, you know, anybody could have written those books. You know, there's a guy who went down, who did a history on Mark Twain. So he went down to Missouri in those days to see if he could find some old-timers who remembered Mark Twain. And there was one old-timer who said, "Yeah, I knew Sam Clemens." That was Mark Twain's real name. "I knew Sam Clemens. I knew just as many stories as he did. The only difference is he wrote them down." Anybody who goes to meetings could have written the same stuff that I did, just as I wrote them down. But I go to meetings, and I have never yet left a meeting without taking something from it. Amazing. Sometimes there's good meetings, sometimes there's bummers, but I've never had a meeting that I didn't get something from. And sometimes it's been life-saving. You know, I grew up in Milwaukee, lived in Pittsburgh for 30, 40 years, and those are towns that are relatively quiet. Right? So that's why I cannot tolerate Manhattan. It's way over, it's too confusing for me, you know? And so I tried to avoid Manhattan. So one day I ended up in Manhattan, and this was one of the days where Murphy's Law was really in vogue, you know? And everything was going bad that day. It came about 12 o'clock, and I was fit to be tied. And I figured, hey, wait a minute, I got to get to a meeting. I didn't know where a meeting was. I called up and I found out that this was lunchtime, and there were 3 lunchtime meetings within the radius of a couple of blocks. So I went to a meeting. At that meeting, there was a young woman speaking, and she told her story, which was to me quite familiar. She started using alcohol and drugs as a teenager, and then by the time she was 22, 23, she was completely down the line, you know, down. And somebody got her into the program, and now she is 9 years clean, and everything is wonderful. Da, 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 da. Okay, I've heard that 1,000 times. And then she said, oh, before I finish, I have to tell you something else. She says, I am a rabid football fan. And the New York Jets, that's my team. I'll never miss a game. But then one weekend, I had to be out of town, and I didn't want to miss the game. So I asked a friend of mine to record the game on her VCR. Well, when I came back, I went over and I got the tape, and she hands me the tape, and she says, by the way, the Jets won. Well, I wanted to watch the game. So I sat down and started watching it. Oh my God, it was horrible. Yeah? The Jets were getting mauled. Right? Comes halftime, they're 20 points behind. She says, you know that under other circumstances, I would have been a nervous wreck. I would have been hitting the refrigerator, cracking my knuckles, pacing the floor. I just sat there perfectly calm. I knew they were going to win. And she said, ever since I came into this program, and I made a conscious decision to turn my life over to God, I know that in the end it's going to turn out all right. Now sometimes I'm 20 points behind at halftime, right? But I know it's going to turn out all right. I must have heard that about 15 years ago. You have no idea how often that has saved my neck. Right? The things can happen, where everything gets all messed up, and I say, wait a minute, right? It's going to turn out all right. Right? And that's the best tranquilizer that I know of. And I could tell you of more kinds of stuff, and stuff that I've picked up from Gamana, and things that I've heard about of spirituality. There is so much spirituality in the program.